Hello, dear listener. Before we begin our story about Nefertiti, the Queen of Ancient Egypt, I would like to ask you to subscribe to our channel. This way, you won't miss new fascinating stories and insights from the past. I wish you a peaceful night, a restful sleep, and gentle, pleasant dreams. May this story bring you inspiration and the beauty of the ancient world. Now, let us begin our journey. Chapter 1: The Girl from Akhmim. Long before the deserts of Egypt fell silent, before the temples were swallowed by sand and time, there was a girl born beneath the gold light of Ra, the sun that never slept. Her name was Nefertiti, and even as a child, those who saw her whispered that she was not entirely mortal. Her eyes held the shimmer of river water at dawn, and her voice carried the calm rhythm of prayer. She came from Akhmim, a small but sacred place near the great river, where the priests of the goddess Hathor sang of beauty and harmony. Her father, some said, was a man of wisdom and ambition, serving in the royal court of Pharaoh Amenhotep III. Others said she had no father known to men, that the sun itself claimed her as its daughter. Nefertiti never denied either story, she simply smiled, like the Nile under moonlight. Her mother, Te, was a nurse and keeper of temple songs. It was from her that Nefertiti learned the language of flowers and the way of listening to silence. At night, Te would tell her tales of queens and gods, of Isis who searched for Osiris, of Mot who balanced truth upon her feather. Remember, her mother would whisper, a queen is not crowned by gold, but by grace. Nefertiti grew among the reeds and palms, her laughter mingling with the cries of ibises and the whisper of sails on the river. The women of Akhmim taught her to grind pigments into color, blue from lapis, red from ochre, gold from the dust of sunlight itself. They painted the eyes of statues so that the gods might see through them, and Nefertiti watched, learning how color could give life to stone. She did not know it yet, but one day her face would be carved from that same stone, gazed upon by generations unborn. As she grew, the priests began to notice her calm presence. When she entered the temple of Hathor, the torches seemed to steady, even the sacred cats purred and followed her steps. The high priest once said, "This child carries the peace of the Aten." But at that time, Aten, the sun disk, was only one among many gods, a faint shimmer among stars. When she reached her 16th summer, messengers came from Thebes, the city of 100 gates. The pharaoh's son, Amenhotep IV, was seeking a bride, a companion not only for the throne but for the soul. He was unlike his father, quiet, distant, with eyes that often wandered upward to the burning sky. He spoke less of wars and more of light, of divine unity, of the music hidden within creation. The messengers had heard of the girl from Akhmim, her beauty, yes, but more than that, her serenity. They said she had the heart of Mot, the balance of truth and gentleness. And so, one morning, beneath a sky pale with sunrise, Nefertiti was summoned to the royal court. Her mother wept softly but proudly. "You were born for this," she whispered. "Carry the light with you. Remember who you are, not only daughter of or child of Akhmim, but daughter of the sun." The journey to Thebes was long and dazzling. The Nile spread wide like a serpent of light. Villages and temples passed by, fishermen lifted their nets, and the air was sweet with lotus and incense. Nefertiti sat in the royal boat, gazing at the horizon, where the sun seemed to rest upon the water. She thought of the old songs, of Ra's daily voyage across the sky, and wondered if she, too, was beginning her own journey through eternity. When she reached Thebes, the city was alive with splendor. Towers of white limestone rose like frozen fire, and the great temple of Ammonius hummed with prayers. But there was tension in the air, an invisible current, like wind before a storm. The priests of Ammonius were powerful, their wealth vast, their temples glowing with gold. Yet the young prince, Amenhotep IV, spoke of a different god, Aten, the radiant disk, source of all life and truth. Many called him a dreamer. Some called him a heretic. When Nefertiti was presented before him, she bowed gracefully, her face calm, her eyes lowered. The prince studied her for a long moment, then smiled. "You are like the morning," he said. Quiet, but filled with light. She did not answer, but her heart beat in harmony with his words. From that day, the two began to walk together in the palace gardens. He spoke of visions, of a time when all hearts would turn to the sun, when temples would open their roofs to heaven, when the gods would no longer hide behind shadows. Nefertiti listened, her mind weaving his dreams into her own thoughts. She felt the warmth of the sun upon her skin and wondered if destiny was shaping them both into instruments of something greater. Weeks passed, and the court murmured with curiosity. The prince had chosen his bride. The wedding of Amenhotep IV and Nefertiti was celebrated under a sky bright as polished bronze. The air was thick with perfume and song. The priests invoked blessings, musicians played flutes and drums, and dancers moved like petals in the wind. When the vows were spoken, Nefertiti raised her eyes toward the blazing Aten. The sunlight touched her brow like a crown. In that moment, something stirred deep within her, not pride, but a solemn understanding. She felt that her life would not belong solely to herself anymore. She was now part of the eternal dance between heaven and earth. As night descended, the young queen sat beside her husband on the palace terrace. The stars shimmered like jewels scattered across the desert sky. "Do you ever fear the darkness?" she asked softly. Amenhotep smiled faintly. "There is no darkness, only the places where light rests before returning." She leaned her head upon his shoulder and closed her eyes. The Nile whispered below, and the air was thick with the scent of myrrh and lotus. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell rang, and the sound lingered like a promise. Thus began the story of Nefertiti, not merely as a queen of Egypt, but as the queen of the sun, the woman through whom light would change the world. And though she did not yet know it, her name, "The Beautiful One Has Come," would one day echo across centuries, whispered by scholars, artists, and dreamers, like a memory of perfection half remembered from another life. The stars moved slowly above Thebes, and the river carried the moon's reflection downstream. Time drifted, gentle as sleep, and the young queen's destiny shimmered ahead like gold hidden beneath sand, waiting, patient, eternal. Chapter 2: The sun rises over Akhetaten. The seasons turned upon the wide back of the Nile. Flood and drought, sowing and harvest, sunrise and sunset, all repeated as they had since the first dawn of Egypt. Yet within the heart of Pharaoh Amenhotep IV and his queen Nefertiti, a new rhythm was growing, one that did not echo the old chants of Ammonius priests. It was the rhythm of light itself, pure and unbroken, the song of Aten, the visible sun. The palace at Thebes, once filled with the deep voices of Ammonius' servants, had become a quieter place. The new pharaoh would sit upon its open terraces for hours, his face lifted to the blazing sky, his fingers tracing invisible lines in the air, the rays of Aten reaching down to touch all life. Nefertiti would sit beside him, her long braids gleaming like obsidian threads, and listen to his dreams unfold. "My queen," he said one morning, "the gods we have served dwell in darkness. They live in stone, hidden from the people who love them. But the Aten hides from no one. He blesses the farmer and the king alike. Why should we worship in shadow when the sky itself is the temple?" Nefertiti's gaze followed the sunlight across the courtyard. "Then let us build such a temple," she murmured, "open to the heavens, where no roof separates the prayers of the people from the light of the God." The pharaoh smiled, that rare, quiet smile that always seemed half divine. "Yes," he whispered. "A city for the sun." Thus began the birth of Akhetaten. The horizon of the sun messengers rode out to find a place untouched by old temples, a land sacred to no god but the rising light itself. They found it in a curve of desert along the eastern bank of the Nile, where the cliffs bowed gently like kneeling giants. There, the sun rose each morning between two golden hills, casting fire across the sand. The pharaoh stood upon that spot and declared, "Here shall Aten dwell, and here shall we dwell with him." The city grew as if summoned from the breath of creation. Workers came from every province, bearing stone, wood, and paint. The sound of hammers echoed like distant drums. Streets were drawn straight and wide, leading to courtyards that opened directly to the sky. No dark sanctuaries, no hidden altars, only sunlight and wind and prayer. In the very heart of it all, a great temple began to rise, its pillars like outstretched arms, its walls gleaming white. Nefertiti walked among the builders often. She wore no heavy crown, only a linen veil to keep the dust from her hair. When the laborers paused to rest, she knelt beside them, offering water, speaking words of encouragement. "The sun sees your work," she would say. "Every stone you lift adds light to the world." And the men would smile, feeling their strength return, for to be seen by the Queen of the Sun was a blessing in itself. The people loved her for her grace and her warmth. They said that when Nefertiti smiled, the air itself seemed to brighten. Some whispered that she was Aten's reflection on earth, a goddess walking among mortals. Others feared that the new faith would anger the old gods, that Ammonius would send his shadow upon Egypt. Yet, even those who doubted could not resist the calm radiance of the royal couple. In the evenings, when the heat softened and the horizon glowed red as pomegranate, Nefertiti and the pharaoh would walk together along the unfinished avenues of Akhetaten. He would speak of a world remade, of peace between man and God, of joy without fear. She would listen, her thoughts flowing like the river, gentle and deep. Often she wondered if the dream they built was too fragile, like sunlight on water, beautiful, but impossible to hold. One night, as the stars unveiled themselves above the desert, the pharaoh turned to her. "Do you believe we can change the hearts of men?" he asked quietly. Nefertiti's eyes were soft as dusk. "The hearts of men are like the Nile," she said. "They flow slowly, winding through the land. But even the Nile, once a trickle from a hidden spring, carved its way to the sea. Give them time, my king. Light always finds its path." He touched her hand, and for a moment they stood in silence, surrounded by the stillness of their newborn city. The moon shone upon the white stones, and the desert seemed to breathe with them, slow, eternal, full of promise. As the months passed, the city neared completion. The royal palace rose along the riverbank, its halls painted in bright colors, its walls alive with scenes of the sun's rays touching all creation, plants, animals, and people. The royal family was shown not as distant gods, but as humans embraced by light. This was Nefertiti's touch. She guided the artists with a gentle vision. Let the people see that even the divine lives through love, she said. Aten's rays reach for all. When the day came to dedicate Akhetaten, the entire court gathered before the great temple. The morning sun blazed upon the horizon, its light pouring through the open courts, turning every surface to gold. Priests of Aten chanted hymns, not within shadows, but under the open sky. The pharaoh raised his arms to the sun disk and proclaimed, Aten is the one God of all. His light nourishes the world. Through him we are renewed. Nefertiti stood beside him, her face serene, her robe flowing like the Nile itself. And as the rays of Aten touched her skin, it seemed that she glowed from within, a living vessel of divine radiance. The people bowed, awed and silent. They felt, for a heartbeat, that heaven had indeed come to earth. From that day forward, Akhetaten became the heart of a new age. Hymns replaced the old chants, the names of forgotten gods were carved away, and the priests of Ammonius found their temples empty. Many left in bitterness, retreating into the west. But the pharaoh and Nefertiti, radiant and devoted, continued to spread their message, that light was truth, that love was the highest worship. And yet, within the bright walls of Akhetaten, the first shadows began to gather. Whispers of discontent reached from Thebes. Merchants complained of change, soldiers muttered of neglected borders. Even some among the court grew restless. The old ways were not easily forgotten. But for now, the sun still ruled the sky. The Queen of the Sun still smiled, her heart full of hope. Every dawn, she rose before the city awoke and climbed to the palace roof, where she offered her own prayer. O radiant Aten, who rises from the horizon. Your light fills the earth with life. You make the Nile flow, the lotus bloom. The hearts of men awaken to your warmth. May my heart remain pure before you, as your light shines forever upon the world. And as she spoke, the desert shimmered like molten gold, and the air seemed to whisper back her name, Nefertiti, the beautiful one has come. That morning, the pharaoh joined her on the roof. He watched the sunlight play upon her face and said softly, My queen, when I see you in the dawn, I know that the world is worth remaking. She smiled faintly. Then let us keep remaking it, my king, day by day, sunrise by sunrise. Below them, Akhetaten awakened, a city of white stone and golden promise, shining against the endless desert. The light of Aten bathed it all, gentle and eternal. For now, the world was bright. Chapter 3, The Children of the Sun. The years flowed through Akhetaten like the Nile itself, steady, luminous, and full of hidden depths. The city of light, born from dream and faith, had become a living symphony of stone and sun. Its streets rang with laughter, the scent of lotus drifted through courtyards, and everywhere the rays of Aten touched white walls and golden altars. Within the palace, the royal family flourished. Nefertiti, now in the full bloom of her queenship, bore daughters, radiant children whose laughter filled the halls like the songs of skylarks. The people called them the children of the sun, for their lives seemed wrapped in divine glow. Their names were whispered with joy: Merit-Aten, the eldest, wise beyond her years, with eyes that mirrored her mother's calm; Meketaten, gentle and curious; Anchisenpaten, spirited and bright, who loved to chase sunbeams across the courtyard. 3 more would follow, each a blossom in the garden of the royal house: Neferneferutin Tasheret, Neferneferur, and Setapenra. 6 daughters of light. Each dawn, Nefertiti rose with them, guiding their small hands in prayer toward the rising Aten. "See," she would whisper, "the god touches all things. The flowers open their eyes because he smiles upon them. Let your hearts be as open as the lotus, children of the sun." The pharaoh, too, found peace in their presence. Though the burden of faith weighed heavily upon him, in the laughter of his daughters he saw the proof of Aten's grace. He often joined them in the palace gardens, drawing symbols of the sun in the sand while the girls played around him. "Let it be known," he would say, "that the joy of life is itself divine worship." Artists were called to immortalize these scenes. They painted the royal family beneath Aten's radiant disk, the pharaoh and queen seated together, their daughters gathered around, the rays of the sun ending in open hands that offered the Ankh, the breath of life. For the first time in Egypt's long history, the royal family was shown not as distant gods, but as a family united in tenderness. It was a revolution not of swords, but of love. Yet beyond the shining walls of Akhetaten, whispers deepened. The priests of Ammonius, cast out from Thebes, watched the new city with cold resentment. Their temples stood silent, their offerings diminished. Merchants who once thrived on the rituals of the old gods grumbled in secret. "The pharaoh forgets our ancestors," they said. "He builds a kingdom of air and light while our trade decays." But within the palace, the world was still bright. Nefertiti ruled beside her husband not merely as consort but as equal. She listened to petitions, spoke with ambassadors, and commanded the household with serene wisdom. The pharaoh trusted her completely. "You are my voice when I am silent," he told her once, beneath the golden columns of their hall. "The people see you and believe in what I see, the peace of Aten upon the earth." Sometimes, at dusk, Nefertiti walked alone upon the balcony that faced the desert cliffs. From there, she could see the whole city, its white roofs glowing in the last light of the day. She would hear the distant songs of workers, the flutes of shepherds, and the murmuring prayers from the temple courts. The air shimmered with heat, then softened into cool blue. She thought of her childhood in Akhmim, of her mother's voice, and of how far she had come. But she also felt something else, a tremor, faint as the shifting of sand. The dream they had built seemed perfect, yet perfection is fragile. She saw the pharaoh withdraw more often into contemplation, his eyes fixed upon the sun as if searching for answers beyond sight. He began composing hymns, long, lyrical praises to Aten, filled with light but also with longing. One evening, as he recited a new hymn, Nefertiti sat beside him. His voice trembled with devotion. "O living Aten, source of all creation! You shine upon the earth and bring life to all. You alone know the hearts of men. For you are the soul within the breath." When he finished, silence lingered like perfume. Nefertiti placed her hand upon his. "You have given Aten words," she said softly, "but remember, the sun gives life to what it touches, not only light. Let our rule be as his rays, warm, not burning." The pharaoh nodded slowly, though his gaze did not leave the horizon. "Sometimes," he murmured, "the fire must cleanse before it can create." His words chilled her, though the air was still warm. As years passed, the faith of Aten became the sole religion of Egypt. The names of other gods were carved out from tombs and stelae. Even the sacred name of Ammonius was forbidden to speak. The pharaoh took a new name, Akhenaten, meaning he who is useful to Aten. The old name, Amenhotep, tied to Ammonius, was abandoned like a serpent's shed skin. And though the queen stood beside him always, the distance between man and God began to grow. Akhenaten spent more time in the temples, surrounded by hymns and sunlight, less in the palace gardens where his daughters played. He began to speak not as a man but as the voice of Aten itself. Nefertiti watched with quiet sorrow. She loved him, not as the world loves kings, but as a woman loves the soul of her companion. Yet she could feel the loneliness creeping into their perfect city. The laughter of her children was now sometimes muted by the wind that swept through empty streets. Still, she remained radiant before her people. "The queen brings the blessing of Aten," the citizens would whisper when she passed. She visited workshops, tended to the sick, and distributed food during drought. Wherever she walked, the people knelt not from fear, but reverence. They saw in her not power, but compassion. Her eldest daughter, Merit Aten, often accompanied her. "Mother," she asked once, "why do we share the bread of the poor when we have so much?" "Because," Nefertiti answered, kneeling to meet her eyes, "the light shines for all. A queen who eats alone in the sun's warmth will one day stand cold in shadow." That night, Nefertiti dreamed of the Nile turning to silver beneath the moon. She saw her reflection floating on its surface, calm, eternal, and yet breaking apart with the ripples. When she awoke, she felt the first true fear of what lay ahead. The dream of Akhenaten was beautiful, but beauty is never safe. For now, though, the sun still ruled the sky. The children still laughed, their songs echoing across terraces and lotus ponds. The city of light still gleamed, untouched by the darkness that waited beyond the hills. And in the heart of the Queen of the Sun, love still burned, steady as the day, fragile as dawn. Chapter 4: The Dimming Light. The city of Akhenaten gleamed still, but its brilliance began to change. What once shone like a newborn sun now shimmered with the weary gold of late afternoon. The stones of its temples still drank in light, but beneath their radiance moved the quiet murmur of unease. Pharaoh Akhenaten had withdrawn into the inner courts of the great temple. There, surrounded by priests and hymns, he spoke endlessly of the one God, the living Aten, whose rays gave life to all. But the warmth that once filled his words had begun to fade. He no longer walked among the people or shared laughter with his daughters. Even Nefertiti, once the mirror of his heart, saw him less and less. He prayed through the night, his face lifted to the stars as if searching for something beyond even the sun. "Aten hides from me," he whispered one dawn. "He has covered his face in brilliance, and I am blind in his light." When Nefertiti came to him, he smiled faintly, but his eyes were distant. "You still see the world," he said, "but I see only the God. You must rule where I cannot." And so she did. The Queen of the Sun became the beating heart of Akhenaten. She held counsel with the scribes, comforted the people, and listened to the soldiers who came bearing news from the borders, news the pharaoh no longer wished to hear. Tribes in the north had begun to test Egypt's strength. The gold from Nubia arrived more slowly, and the foreign princes whispered of weakness in the land of the sun. Still, Nefertiti held her head high. The Aten will guide us, she told her ministers, her voice calm as flowing water. We do not rule through fear, but through light. But light, she knew, could not feed an army. Her eldest daughter, Merit Aten, now nearly grown, stood beside her at court. She had her mother's grace and her father's eyes, deep, searching, full of fire. "Mother," she said one evening as they watched the sunset from the palace roof, "the people are afraid. They say Aten has turned his face. How can light abandon us?" Nefertiti placed a hand upon her daughter's shoulder. "The sun never abandons, my child. Even when it sets, it is only traveling to another land. The people will see the dawn again." But when she spoke, she felt the faint tremor of doubt within her own heart. In the following months, Akhenaten's isolation deepened. He built smaller shrines within the temple, places where only he and a chosen few could enter. Some whispered that he spoke to Aten directly, others said he merely spoke to himself. The boundaries between devotion and obsession had begun to blur. Nefertiti, still beloved by her people, continued to appear in public. She visited the workshops where artisans carved her likeness in limestone, serene, perfect, crowned with her tall blue headdress. The sculptor Thutmose, who led the royal atelier, often paused as he worked, marveling at her stillness. "My queen," he said once, "how do you hold such peace when the world trembles?" Nefertiti smiled gently. "Because the world always trembles," she replied. "Only the heart must remain still." But she, too, felt the tremors. Food had grown scarce, the Nile's floods had been meager for 2 years. Traders grumbled in the markets. The priests of Ammonius, once scattered, were gathering influence again in the south. Messages arrived from Thebes, veiled warnings written in elegant hands. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a messenger arrived breathless from Memphis. "My queen," he cried, kneeling before her, "rebellion stirs in the western provinces. They say the old gods demand their return." Nefertiti dismissed the court and stood alone upon the balcony. The wind carried the scent of sand and distance. She raised her eyes to the dimming sky. "Aten," she whispered, "show me the way. If I have been your vessel, do not let me shatter now." That night she dreamed of a great statue, a figure of stone, half buried in the desert, its face eroded but still beautiful. When she reached out to touch it, the statue's eyes opened and her own reflection stared back. She awoke with tears upon her cheeks. In the days that followed, she moved with renewed purpose. She ordered grain distributed from the royal stores, restored irrigation to the nearby fields, and called upon scribes to send letters of peace to the governors of distant towns. Wherever she walked, the people gathered to see her, not only as queen but as a living symbol of Egypt's endurance. Yet within the palace walls, her husband grew thinner, paler, more withdrawn. Sometimes, he would wander the halls at night, murmuring hymns to the unseen light. Once, Nefertiti found him standing before the great window of the temple, his face wet with tears. The god no longer speaks, he said. Perhaps he speaks only through you. Nefertiti took his hand. Then let us listen together. But Akhenaten shook his head. No, he whispered. You belong to the world. I belong to the sun. And she knew then that the man she had loved, the dreamer who once spoke of peace and joy, was slipping away, consumed by the very light he had sought. The city continued to shine, but its brilliance felt strained, like gold leaf over stone beginning to crack. The laughter of her children was softer now. The music of the festivals had quieted. At dusk, the streets that once blazed with color now seemed too wide, too empty. One afternoon, as Nefertiti walked through the gardens, she saw the sculptor Thutmose watching her. He held a small statue, her likeness, not finished yet, but already alive with presence. I want the world to remember you as you are, he said quietly, not as the world has made you. Nefertiti looked at the figure. Her own eyes, carved in stone, seemed to gaze back with tranquil strength. Then let it be so, she said. Let them remember not my face, but the calm within it. He bowed deeply, and the Queen of the Sun turned away, walking slowly through the fading light. The air was heavy, scented with dust and the distant murmur of prayers. That evening, she stood upon the palace roof with her daughters. The sun sank behind the cliffs in a blaze of crimson and gold. For a moment, the whole city glowed, then dimmed, as if the god himself had drawn a veil across the sky. Mother, little Ankhesenaten whispered, clutching her hand, why does the sun hide? Nefertiti knelt beside her and smiled faintly. Because even the sun must rest, she said. But he will rise again, as we must. Yet as the darkness deepened, Nefertiti felt a chill unlike any before. The horizon no longer promised dawn, only memory. And in the quiet of that long night, the Queen of the Sun finally feared that her light might one day fade, leaving behind only her image, eternal, beautiful, and silent. Chapter 5: The Fall of Akhenaten. The years that followed were heavy with silence. The once radiant city of Akhenaten stood beneath the same sun, but its light had grown pale, almost mournful, as though Aten himself looked down in sorrow. The wind that once carried laughter now moved through empty streets, whispering through the colonnades like a ghost remembering joy. Pharaoh Akhenaten rarely left his temple. His prayers had become fevered, his hymns, once filled with beauty, now trembled with fear. He saw omens in the flight of birds, messages in the shifting of clouds. His attendants obeyed in trembling reverence, for none dared question the voice of the living God. But the people had grown hungry. The river had failed them for a third year. Crops withered, the granaries thinned. Merchants spoke in low tones of rebellion, of Thebes rising again beneath the banners of Ammonius. Soldiers deserted to their villages. Only Nefertiti remained steadfast, a queen still luminous amid ruin. Each dawn she stood upon the terrace and offered her prayer to the sun, though the city below answered no longer. "O radiant Aten," she whispered, "if it is your will to test us, let me bear the burden. Spare your children." Her daughters had grown tall. Merit-Aten, now nearly a woman, served beside her as princess and priestess. Meketaten, sweet and gentle, had fallen ill that spring. The palace physicians whispered of a fever that no prayer could cure. For days Nefertiti kept vigil by her bed, bathing her brow with cool water, singing the lullabies her own mother had once sung. "Sleep, little star of Aten," she murmured. "Even the sun rests before it shines again." But one dawn, the child did not wake. When the news spread, the city mourned. Even the priests of Aten fell silent. The great temple bell tolled once and was still. Akhenaten came to the chamber, his face hollow, his eyes distant. He stood over his daughter's still form and whispered, "She has joined the light." Then, without another word, he turned away and returned to the temple. Nefertiti did not move for a long time. Only when the first rays of morning entered the room did she lift her head and say quietly, "Then let her light guide me." From that day, the Queen of the Sun was changed. Her voice, though still soft, carried a new strength. She ruled openly in her husband's absence, meeting foreign envoys, organizing the feeding of the hungry, and commanding the rebuilding of the dikes. The people once again looked to her, not for glory, but for survival. "Long live the Queen," they whispered in the markets. "She alone remembers us." Yet she knew the tide had turned. From Thebes came word that the priests of Ammonius had regained power. They spoke of restoring the old gods, of cleansing Egypt of heresy. In the north, generals murmured of rebellion. The world beyond Akhetaten was stirring against the city of light. One evening, Nefertiti called her eldest daughter to her side. "Meridate," she said, "if the sun sets upon us, you must keep its flame alive. Remember what we built, not the stones, but the faith that all life is sacred." Meritaten's eyes glistened. "Mother, will the sun rise here again?" Nefertiti touched her cheek. "It rises everywhere, my child. No darkness can hold it forever." But even as she spoke, she knew the city would not endure. Akhenaten's isolation had become complete. He no longer ruled Egypt, he ruled only his vision. Messengers from the provinces were turned away. Tribute from the empire ceased to arrive. The treasury emptied. At night, Nefertiti walked alone through the silent courtyards. The white walls glowed faintly beneath the moon, like bones of some sleeping giant. She heard the rustle of palm leaves, the cry of a distant heron, and the faint echo of children's laughter that once filled these same halls. The city that had been her husband's dream, their dream, was dying. Then, one evening, Akhenaten summoned her. He was thin as a reed, his face lined by sleepless years. "The world rejects us," he said. "They reject the truth. But Aten remains, eternal and unseen." Nefertiti knelt before him. "My king," she said softly, "truth needs no throne. Let the people return to their gods if they must. You have shown them the light, that is enough." But he shook his head fiercely. "No. Without Aten, there is no Egypt. Without the sun, there is only dust." She saw then that his heart had turned inward, beyond reach. The man she had loved, the dreamer who once spoke of peace and beauty, was lost within his own vision of divinity. She wept, though he did not see. That night, a storm rose from the desert, rare and violent. Thunder rolled across the horizon, lightning flashed over the cliffs. The people huddled in their homes, terrified. To them, it was the wrath of the forgotten gods returning. To Nefertiti, it felt like the cry of the earth itself. When dawn came, half the banners had been torn from the temples. Dust covered the altars. The sun emerged pale and cold. In the streets, the people whispered that the age of Aten had ended. Soon after, Akhenaten's health began to fail. He seldom left his bed, his voice little more than a breath. In his final days, he called for Nefertiti. "Do not mourn," he said. "The light never dies. It only changes its form." She took his hand. "Then go to it," she whispered, "and may the light receive you gently." When he died, the city fell into stillness. There were no grand processions, no golden tombs. The priests of Aten buried their god-king within the cliffs beyond Akhetaten, beneath a simple seal of the sun disk. Nefertiti stood alone before the tomb as the last stones were set. The wind lifted her veil, and she looked upon the desert, endless, silent, vast. That night, she returned to the palace. The halls were empty, the torches unlit. Only the moonlight followed her steps. She entered the chamber where Thutmose had once worked and found, resting upon a table, the unfinished bust of her own likeness. Its eyes were unpainted, its face calm and eternal. She touched the smooth stone and felt tears well within her. "Let them remember," she whispered, "that once there was light." In the months that followed, the Queen of the Sun ruled alone. Some said she took a new name, Nefertiti, the perfect beauty of Aten, and reigned in her husband's stead, trying to preserve what little remained of their dream. Others claimed she disappeared into the desert, seeking the horizon where her god rose each day. No one truly knew. But those who remained in Akhetaten told stories of a woman seen at dawn, standing upon the cliffs above the river, her silhouette framed by the rising sun. They said she stood motionless, her hands lifted to the sky, until the light engulfed her, and then she was gone. The city she built would soon be abandoned. Sand would drift through its temples, the walls would crumble. Yet the stone faces of Nefertiti, serene and eternal, would survive the centuries, waiting beneath the desert until another age uncovered them. And when they did, the world would look upon her face, calm, graceful, unbroken, and remember that once, in a time of gold and dust, a queen had dared to build a city for the sun. Chapter 6: The Eternal Face. The sands closed over Akhetaten as though the desert itself wished to forget. The city that had once glittered with sunlight was swallowed by silence. Wind swept through the empty courtyards, carrying only the faint echo of children's laughter and the rustle of palm leaves long dead. Years passed. Then decades. The Nile changed its course, the temples cracked. Columns fell, their carved prayers worn away by dust and time. The desert, patient and vast, covered all. But the name Nefertiti did not fade. It drifted through the winds like a whisper, carried by traders and poets, a story half believed and half dreamed, the tale of the Queen of the Sun. Some said she had vanished into the horizon, taken by Aten himself in a chariot of fire. Others believed she had journeyed south to Nubia, or east to foreign lands, her face hidden behind veils. Still others claimed she lived in secret among her people, walking the markets of Thebes like an ordinary woman, unseen yet ever watching. In truth, her fate was lost to history. But her spirit endured, not in words, not even in temples, but in the memory of beauty that transcended death. In the workshops of forgotten sculptors, Her image remained, the bust of Nefertiti, carved in stone so lifelike that time itself dared not touch it. Her face, serene and poised, seemed to breathe even in stillness. The lines of her jaw, the curve of her lips, the proud tilt of her neck, all spoke of a calm beyond grief, of strength born from sorrow. Thutmose, her sculptor, had once said, "The gods dwell in silence, but I have seen their echo in her face." When he finished his masterpiece, he placed it in his studio, not for worship but for remembrance. There it stayed, buried beneath centuries of dust, waiting for the world to remember what it had lost. Generations rose and fell. Pharaohs came and went, warriors, builders, dreamers, but none bore the grace of Nefertiti. The temples of Ammonius were restored, the old gods reclaimed their thrones. Akhetaten's name was stricken from records, cursed as the city of heresy. Yet even the scribes could not erase her completely. Some ancient hands, moved by secret reverence, preserved her name in hidden corners of papyrus. Nefertiti, the beautiful one has come. Time flowed like the river, and Egypt itself became legend. Then one day, thousands of years later, men came again to the silent hills of Amarna. They were not priests or conquerors, but seekers, men of learning, clothed in dust, guided by curiosity. They dug into the sands and found the broken walls of the city of the sun. Bit by bit, the light returned to what had been buried. And in a small room, beneath layers of forgotten stone, they uncovered her face. When the light of the modern sun fell upon it, the air seemed to tremble. The eyes, unpainted yet alive, gazed into eternity. The lips held that same quiet smile, neither joy nor sorrow, but something greater, peace. The men who found her stood speechless. One whispered, "She is alive." They carried the bust carefully into daylight. As the world looked upon her, awe spread across continents. Artists, scholars, and dreamers saw in her the perfection of form, the harmony of spirit and flesh. To some, she was the ideal of beauty, to others, a reminder of the mystery of time. But to those who listened closely, her silence spoke. Beauty is not the face, but the soul that endures. The sun may set, but its warmth remains in memory. Museums rose to guard her, poets wrote of her, historians traced the echoes of her life. Yet none could truly say who she had been, or how she had ended. They could only feel what she left behind, the serenity of someone who had touched both love and loss, both divinity and humanity. At night, under the glass case where her image rested, the light of the lamps gleamed upon her cheek like the golden rays of Aden reborn. Visitors would stand in silence, unable to look away. Some felt peace, others sadness, but all felt the strange certainty that she was not gone. For perhaps, in some unseen realm where time folds into itself, Nefertiti still stands upon the cliffs of the Nile, watching the dawn rise over the world she once ruled. The river still glimmers beneath her feet, the air still hums with the song of life. She lifts her hands toward the sky, not to command, but to welcome the eternal day. And the sun, faithful as ever, rises to meet her. Its light flows over the earth, touching every heart that remembers her name. It gleams upon the deserts, the cities, the rivers of the living world. It glows upon the silent face in the museum hall, giving it life once more. In that moment, time dissolves. The past and present breathe as one. The Queen of the Sun smiles again, her spirit carried in every dawn, her name whispered by the light itself. Nefertiti. The beautiful one has come. And she has never left. Chapter 7, The Dream of the Sun. There was no darkness when she awoke, only light that breathed. It was not the harsh light of noon, nor the gentle glow of dawn, it was the essence of radiance itself, warm and endless. She felt neither body nor pain, only the soft current of memory moving through her, as though she were part of the wind. Nefertiti opened her eyes, and the world that surrounded her was made of gold mist and silence. Shapes moved within it, shadows of familiar forms, the river, the city, the faces of her children. They shimmered like reflections upon water. "Where am I?" she asked, though no voice left her lips. And the light answered, not in words but in feeling, "You are within the dream of the sun." She understood then that she had crossed the veil, not into death, but into the heart of eternity. All things that had ever known the sun existed here, interwoven in its eternal radiance. The spirits of kings and peasants drifted together like motes of dust, all equal beneath the same warmth. Through the glow she saw Akhenaten walking among the rays, his face calm at last. He no longer carried the weight of obsession or sorrow. "My queen," he said softly, "you have come home." Nefertiti moved to him, though there were no steps to take. "Is this Aten's kingdom?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "It is not a kingdom. It is a song that never ends. We are its notes." They stood together upon the horizon that had no end. Below them, the world of men shimmered like a distant mirage, Egypt, the Nile, the stones of Thebes, the sleeping city of Akhenaten beneath its shroud of sand. She felt no grief, only a deep tenderness for all she had once known. Yet something stirred within her, not longing, but purpose. She sensed that her story was not finished. "If this is eternity," she said, "then why do I still remember the dust, the laughter, the pain?" "Because," Akhenaten replied, "the light remembers all that it touches. We are not lost, we are reflected." He gestured toward the vastness below, where new suns rose over lands yet unborn. "The dream continues, carried by those who look to the light. You will find them, even here." As he spoke, the vision changed. Nefertiti found herself walking beside the river once more, not the Nile of her time, but one made of stars. Its surface shimmered with visions of ages yet to come. She saw ships of iron crossing oceans, cities of glass and light, faces of people who spoke languages she could not name, yet every one of them looked upward at the same sun. And she realized that Aten had never belonged to Egypt alone. The light she had worshipped had no boundary, it belonged to every soul that sought warmth and life. Then, among those distant futures, she saw a room filled with pale light and silent awe, men and women gathered around her image, the bust that had survived the centuries. They gazed upon her as if she were alive. She felt their wonder, their curiosity, their quiet reverence. One young woman stood closest to the glass, her eyes wide, her lips parted in a silent whisper. Nefertiti heard it across the divide of time, "Beautiful one, who were you?" The queen smiled. "I am who you are becoming," she whispered back, though the mortal could not hear. "I am the part of you that seeks light, that loves beauty, that endures." The stars rippled, and the vision faded. She stood once more within the golden current, her heart light as air. The soul of Egypt flowed through her, not as a crown or a throne, but as an endless breath. Then came a voice, not Akhenaten's, nor Aten's, but the deep voice of the universe itself. The sun dreams of all that lives. Those who shine in its memory are never lost. Return, if you wish, to the dream of men. Or rest in the dream of light. Nefertiti bowed her head. I will return, she said. Not as a queen, but as a whisper. Let those who dream remember me, and through me, remember the sun. The light grew brighter, until there was no difference between her and its glow. Her name dissolved into radiance, her form into warmth. But within that brilliance lingered the faint outline of her smile, calm, knowing, eternal. And somewhere, far below, the morning sun rose over the desert once more. Its first rays touched the stones of Amarna, the sands that hid her memory, and for a heartbeat, the air seemed to shimmer, as if the world itself had taken a deep, remembering breath. Those who walked the valley that day felt the warmth on their faces and did not know why their hearts grew still. For the Queen of the Sun had smiled again. And the world, for a moment, dreamed with her. Chapter 8, The River Beyond Time. The dream deepened, and the light around her became movement. She felt the slow pulse of water underfoot and found herself standing upon a bark made of gold and papyrus reeds. Beneath it flowed a river that glittered like a trail of stars. It curved through a sky that was neither night nor day, its banks woven from memory and myth. The river beyond time, said a voice. Nefertiti turned. At the prow of the vessel stood a figure wrapped in linen, with the head of a falcon and eyes like burning suns. He was tall as the horizon itself. I am Ra, he said, the first light, the last flame. Every soul that has known the sun must travel my river before it rests. Nefertiti bowed. Then I am yours to guide. The god inclined his head. You have walked in both worlds. Few among mortals have dared to bear the sun's name upon their lips. Yet you loved the light not for power but for beauty. That love will carry you. The boat glided forward without oars. The water was made of visions, ripples formed images from her life, the laughter of her daughters, the shadow of the palace colonnade, the tender face of Akhenaten before the weight of kingship consumed him. Each image rose and faded like petals upon the surface. They passed through a gate of flame, and the air changed. On one bank, she saw fields of golden grain swaying under a crimson sky, the field of reeds, where the blessed of Egypt rested forever. Men and women worked in peace, smiling, their bodies young again. They raised their hands in greeting. Welcome, beautiful one, they cried. Nefertiti smiled in return. Yet the boat did not stop. Will I not join them? She asked. Ra's voice was calm. Not yet. You have more to see. Your spirit bears memory for the world above. Until you have given it freely, your journey continues. The river curved, and the light grew softer. There, among shadows shaped like mountains, she saw another vessel, vast, black as obsidian, the solar bark of Osiris, the god of the dead. Upon it stood Isis, her wings spread wide, and beside her, the child Horus holding the crescent moon in his hands. Isis looked toward Nefertiti, her eyes filled with a mother's kindness. Queen of the living sun, she said, your devotion has joined you to us. You sought truth in a single God, yet truth is many and one. The sun and the moon, life and death, all are woven together. Nefertiti bowed her head. I wish to bring light to my people. And you did, Isis replied. But remember, even light must rest in darkness to be renewed. Then the goddess reached out her hand, and a feather drifted from her wing, white as dawn. It floated across the river and came to rest upon Nefertiti's heart. It felt lighter than breath, and yet it filled her with strength. Ra spoke again, the feather is Ma'at, truth and harmony. When your heart is weighed, it will balance perfectly. You may pass freely between worlds. As the boat sailed onward, the river grew narrow and clear. Beneath its surface flowed scenes of ages yet unborn. She saw new temples rising, languages changing, faces of queens and mothers who would come long after her, each bearing a spark of the same courage. They are your daughters too, Ra said. Through them your light continues. She watched as centuries unfolded, wars, peace, music, the building and breaking of empires. Yet through it all, she saw the same rhythm, the rising of light after darkness, the endless pulse of renewal. Finally, the river opened into a vast sea that shimmered like molten gold. At its center blazed the sun itself, not a disk, but a living heart. It beat slowly, each pulse sending warmth through the infinite sky. Ra turned to her. Here ends the river beyond time. From this sea, all souls return to the cycle. You may rest, or you may choose to shine again. Nefertiti gazed at the light. To rest is peace, she said softly, but to shine is love. Let me be the warmth that touches the waking world, a whisper at dawn, a glimmer in a dream. Ra smiled. Then you shall travel the rays. Go, Queen of the Sun, and be what you have always been, a bridge between the seen and the unseen. The bark dissolved into radiance. The river folded around her like wings, and she rose upon the current of light. The last thing she heard was the chant of the gods, deep and slow, echoing through eternity. She who was beautiful is light again. She who sought harmony becomes harmony. Her name will pass through every dawn. And as she rose, she felt no boundary between herself and the sunlight that filled all worlds. The river, the sky, the past, all became one breath. Far below, on the mortal earth, the first glow of morning spread across the desert. The stones of Amarna glimmered, and a hawk traced a slow circle above the cliffs, as if remembering a promise. The Queen of the Sun was gone from the world of men, yet in every sunrise, she lived anew. Chapter 9, The Voice of Stone. The light released her gently, as if setting down a feather upon the surface of time. When Nefertiti opened her eyes again, she stood not in heaven nor upon earth, but in a place between, a world made of echoes. Around her rose columns without end, each carved with the memory of voices. The air shimmered with faint murmurs, the language of stone itself. This is the house of memory, said a voice. She turned and saw Thutmose, her sculptor, standing beside a half-finished statue. His hands were dust, yet his eyes shone with the same devotion he had held in life. Here dwell all forms that have ever been shaped by love. Every chisel mark is a heartbeat preserved. Nefertiti touched the statue before him. The stone was cool and alive beneath her fingers. Within it, she felt the pulse of centuries, the quiet endurance of what had been made to last. "This is how they remember," she said softly. "Not through words, but through hands." "Yes," Thutmose replied. "Stone listens. It never forgets. It carries the breath of those who dared to create." He led her through vast halls where figures of kings and gods stood in eternal stillness. Some were broken, others stood whole and radiant. Each one whispered stories as she passed, of rivers diverted, of temples lost, of prayers murmured by forgotten lips. In one corner she saw a small relief, a mother holding a child. Its lines were simple, yet perfect. "Who made this?" she asked. "A mason whose name was never written," Thutmose answered. "But his work sings as loudly as any king's monument. The stone does not care for titles, it remembers sincerity." They walked on until they came upon her own likeness, not the famous bust, but another, unfinished form. Its face was only half carved, one eye open, the other still imprisoned within the block. Nefertiti gazed at it for a long time. "Will it ever be complete?" she asked. Thutmose smiled sadly. "It is complete in its incompleteness. What remains uncarved belongs to eternity." She thought of all she had built, temples, hymns, cities, and how they had fallen to dust. Yet this fragment, this half-formed face, still spoke across ages. "Then even silence can endure," she said. "Especially silence," replied Thutmose. "The world changes, but what is unspoken lingers. The echo of beauty outlives its form." From far away came a sound like wind moving through reeds. The hall trembled, the statues seemed to breathe. Through the shimmering air she saw visions again, men digging in sand, light striking marble, voices in many tongues marveling at her image. "They look at me," she whispered, "and they see perfection. But they do not know the sorrow that shaped it." "They do not need to," Thutmose said. "They see balance, and balance teaches peace. What you were, and what they believe you to be, both are true. You have become the language of stillness." Nefertiti closed her eyes and listened. The whispers of the stone joined with the hum of distant time. The voice of every sculptor, every hand that had touched clay or bronze or limestone, merged into one vast harmony. Then another sound rose, softer, deeper. It came from beneath the earth itself. "The stones are waking," said Thutmose. "They remember more than we do. Come." They descended a stairway of light into the heart of the hall. There lay a single slab of obsidian, smooth as water, black as the space between stars. Upon its surface moved faint ripples, reflections of every image ever carved. The face of a lion, a child, a queen, all shifting within the dark glass. "This is the mirror of time," Thutmose said. "Through it, the memory of form returns to the living world." Nefertiti looked into the mirror and saw her reflection, not as a queen, but as light shaped into human grace. Behind her reflection stretched the line of all who had come after her, sculptors, painters, mothers, dreamers, those who carried fragments of her courage in their own creations. She spoke softly to the reflection, "Do they still hear me?" The mirror shimmered. Within it, she saw a woman painting at dusk, her brush trembling, a child molding clay with a smile, an old man repairing a broken statue in a museum. Each moved with a quiet reverence, as though guided by an unseen presence. Yes, the mirror whispered. They do not know your name upon their lips, but their hearts remember the balance you became. Through them, your beauty endures. Nefertiti felt tears form, not of sorrow, but of vast, tender recognition. If every work is a prayer, she said, then creation itself is the temple. Thutmose bowed. And you, my queen, are its eternal priestess. The vision of the hall began to fade. The statues grew translucent, their whispers softer, until only the faint rhythm of chisels echoed, a timeless heartbeat beneath all things made by human hands. Before the dream dissolved completely, Nefertiti turned once more to the half-carved face. She placed her palm upon the cool stone and whispered, "Speak for me when I am silent." The unfinished lips seemed to curve slightly, as if in promise. Then the world of stone folded into light. Chapter 10: The Return of the Beautiful One. Almost equals 10,000 characters, exact count at the end. The world slept beneath the hum of night. Beyond the reach of time, in the stillness between stars, the light that had once been Nefertiti drifted like a breath of warmth through eternity. She had passed through memory, through stone, through the silence of gods, and now the light sought something new. Below her, the earth turned. Centuries had rolled away like grains of sand. The kingdoms of the Nile were dust, yet the river still flowed, its surface gleaming with the same golden fire that had once shone upon her skin. And upon its banks, under a modern sun, a young woman walked alone. Her name was Layla. She was an archaeologist, small, thoughtful, her hands calloused from dust and work. She had come from far away to study the ruins of Amarna, the city of dreams. But tonight she could not sleep. The desert wind whispered through her tent, carrying the scent of stone and eternity. She rose, took a lantern, and stepped into the open night. The sand shimmered beneath the moon. Before her stretched the shadowed hills where once had stood the palaces of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Layla felt a strange pull, not fear, but invitation. She followed the wind up the slope, past shards of pottery half buried in dust, until she reached a place where the ground opened into an ancient court. Columns lay broken like sleeping giants. The silence was immense. She raised her lantern. Its light fell upon a fragment of relief, the curve of a woman's cheek, the trace of a smile carved 3,000 years before. Dust clung to the stone, but the beauty was undiminished. Layla reached out, brushing the sand away. "Who were you?" she whispered. And from somewhere beyond the veil of night, the light that was Nefertiti stirred. For a moment, the desert itself seemed to breathe. The air shimmered, and the flame of the lantern bent backward as though bowing to an unseen presence. The broken relief glowed faintly, a pulse of warmth, a sigh through eternity. Layla felt her heartbeat quicken. Her hand trembled, yet she did not move away. Then she heard it, not a sound, but a thought, soft as sunlight through linen. "I was the beginning of your wonder." Layla froze. Her lantern flickered, shadows trembling across the walls. The air felt alive, charged with something older than language. "I've dreamed of you," she murmured. "Since I was a child, a face in the light." "You dreamed of what never dies," the voice replied, calm, infinite, tender. "You carry what we built, you who remember beauty amid dust. The young woman closed her eyes. The wind wrapped around her like silk. She saw flashes, the gleam of gold upon white stone, the laughter of children by the river, the sound of drums in distant temples. She saw a queen standing upon a terrace, arms lifted to the dawn. And when she opened her eyes again, the ancient court was no longer ruin. It lived. Columns rose tall and unbroken, banners of crimson and gold rippled in the breeze. The air smelled of lotus and incense. Before her stood Nefertiti, radiant, robed in sunlight. Her eyes held the calm of the universe. Layla fell to her knees. Am I dreaming? The queen smiled. All life is a dream of the sun. You have simply awakened within it. They stood together at the threshold of ages, one of flesh, one of light. Nefertiti stepped forward and touched Layla's brow with her hand. You seek to uncover the past, she said, but what you seek is not buried. It lives in you, the courage to see beyond fear, the grace to build in the light, even when the world forgets. Tears welled in Layla's eyes. The world is so dark now, she whispered. We've forgotten what beauty means. Then remember, Nefertiti said. Remember that beauty is not perfection, but harmony. It is the balance between what breaks and what endures. You hold that balance every time you create, every time you love, every time you forgive. The wind rose, and the vision shimmered. The palace walls turned back to ruin, but the queen remained, her form made of gold light, dissolving into dawn. Will I see you again? Layla asked. Nefertiti smiled, that same calm smile carved in stone for millennia. You will see me every morning, when the first light touches the earth. You will hear me in silence, and in the courage of your own hands. The desert brightened. The first rays of the sun crowned the cliffs of Amarna, spilling gold across the valley. The light passed through Nefertiti, and she became the sunrise itself, vast, eternal, beautiful beyond words. Layla stood alone, the wind lifting her hair. The ruins glowed softly, as if the stones themselves remembered. And deep within the sand, the old city sighed, not in mourning, but in awakening. She whispered into the light, the beautiful one has come. A voice answered, carried on the warmth of the new day. And she will never depart. The sun rose higher. The river gleamed in the distance. The song of the desert became the breath of the world, ancient, endless, full of life. And somewhere beyond sight, Nefertiti's laughter joined the light, not the laughter of a queen, but of a soul that had found her reflection in every heart that still dared to dream.